we're quite plain with people that the only reason we did not go bankrupt as a company in 2010 is because biochar is valuable. So we need all of these things, but no one in 2009 would have given us money to build a biochar plant. They gave us money to build a power plant that happened to also make biochar.
Carbonsations, today's carbon industry leaders.
Are you passionate about climate action and staying on top of the latest trends in the world of carbon capture, removal, and markets? Then the Carbon Herald has you covered. Every week, we bring you the top news, breakthroughs, and insights from the world of carbon management, delivered straight to your inbox. No fluff, no jargon, just the essential info you need to stay informed. So whether you're a climate professional or just someone who cares, make sure you're subscribed. Visit carbonherald.com and sign up today for our weekly newsletter. Welcome to the Carbonsations podcast, where we speak to some of the leading figures in the emerging carbon industry. Our guest today is Greg Stangl, CEO of California-based Phoenix Energy, a company that is heavily involved in carbon removal. Greg, it's great to have you on. Thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to talk to you about all the different things Phoenix Energy is doing. But before we do, it's tradition on this podcast that we first get to know our guest's background a little bit. So if you don't mind, I'd love it if you could share with us a little bit of what you used to do before Phoenix Energy.
Yeah, absolutely. So before Phoenix Energy, I had two jobs, which were, in retrospect, essential to getting started with Phoenix. I worked for the United Nations in Central and Eastern Europe. And after that, kind of entered the private equity world over there. And that is what basically got us into the business and introduced us to gasification as a solution for some of the energy challenges in Central Europe. And that was really the seed of what became Phoenix Energy.
Okay. And could you tell us a little bit more about what Phoenix Energy does today and what kind of drew you to this type of work?
Yeah, absolutely. So what Phoenix Energy does today is build, own, and operate a network of community-scale biomass gasification facilities. So biomass gasification, just in case anybody doesn't know, is effectively baking wood rather than burning it. You know, your grandfather's biomass, you used to burn the wood, boil water, make steam, make electricity. Today, we've been doing it since the 1800s, but gasification, we essentially bake the wood at a very high temperature, starved of oxygen, and so we get a hydrogen gas and solid carbon. Now we take that hydrogen off and we convert that into electricity, but we're left with this substance called biochar. And so I love to joke that, we've been carbon negative since 2003. It was just nobody cared about that until like a week ago Thursday. But as COVID kind of kicked us in the teeth and made everything 50% more expensive to build, these things called carbon credits just sort of materialized out of thin air to kind of help us compensate for the fact that, you know, COVID, supply chain disruption, whatever you want to blame it on, everything got a lot more expensive to put into action. But, you know, yeah, as we say, we've been withdrawing carbon or removing carbon since 2003. It was just, we didn't start being able to monetize that until very recently.
Excellent. And now, as I mentioned, Phoenix Energy has a strong focus on carbon removal, but what sets you aside from most players in the industry, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, you focus on more than just one pathway, right? You have the biochar, you also have BECCS.
Absolutely. And I think that's really the differentiating factor, which is we build a plant. You can't make biochar without making energy, and you can't make energy without making biochar in the world of gasification. What happens with a lot of things like a biochar only business is you have to simply waste the energy because you're not taking it off in a sophisticated enough way that you make it usable. So we have always been, I think you could say, perhaps an energy first deployment of this technology. But I think what makes that unique is that it's made sustainable. It doesn't depend exclusively on the monetization of an ecosystem service in a voluntary market, which is not stunningly bankable at the moment, because we're able to get a long-term utility contract for the energy. And that is what makes this sustainable. If all the government subsidies in the world were to disappear tomorrow, we would still be here. And the proof of that is, as we were talking about earlier, we got our start in Eastern Europe. Nobody was paying money for carbon removal. They were paying money because the Russians were threatening to shut the gas off over NATO membership, and they were panicking about where they were going to get their energy from. And so that is really kind of how we got into the business. And so we really look at our model as, hey, look, our stool has 3 legs, and therefore it is sustainable and financeable. And that's why we're on project number 5 and not, the pilot plant.
That certainly opens the doors for a lot of questions, but first off, I'd like to get a deeper dive into the BECCS side of your operations, if we can do that. So first off, if you could please explain how and why is BECCS beneficial for climate? And then if you could walk us through, as you said, your 5th project right now, if you can tell us anything about its capacity, where it is, how it works, anything you can share with us.
Absolutely. So on the BECCS side, what I would tell you is we have 3 main ways in which, in our mind, we do the carbon map. And the one is the alternate disposition of the fuel. And so we work mostly, but not exclusively, in the forest. And so now, you've got 3 main ways that the fuel in the forest goes away. There is masticate and scatter and turn into methane. There is pile and burn, which is probably what predominates. That also includes, prescribed fire or intentional fire, which now we try to call cultural burning, I think, to make it a little bit more palatable. But in any way, you are intentionally setting fires to reduce the risk of catastrophic fire. Those are the main ways that material goes away. So by using that as fuel for bioenergy or BECCS, we convert that material into hydrogen and carbon. And in the carbon, we are removing, and in the converting of that hydrogen into energy, we're really displacing the California grid, which is efficient and will become more efficient over time, but is much less efficient from a carbon perspective than we are. Most of our power is made by burning natural gas. And so we would advocate, hey, why don't you leave that gas in the ground? And we'll use this thing that you're about to light on fire anyway in the middle of the woods. And then the third and the smallest impact we have on carbon avoidance and carbon removal is the biochar. And that is the part of the carbon that we get paid for. There's no monetization of the avoidance of wildfire. There is no monetization for us of being more carbon efficient than the California grid. But the monetization comes from the biochar slice. So on a 1 megawatt basis, we are probably, if I'm doing this right, 2,000. Yeah, that's it. 2,000 tons in the biochar, 3,000 tons in the superiority to the California grid, and about 20 ton in terms of the alternate disposition of the fuel, basically giving the fuel to us instead of lighting it on fire on purpose. Most of the projects we're doing right now are located in the Sierra Nevada mountains and foothill communities of California. So our next project is a 3 megawatt facility. So that will probably remove about from a carbon credit that we can sell in the voluntary market, that will generate a little shy of 7,000 tons or 7,000 credits per year. So that is a 3 megawatt plant, and it's co-located with the Calaveras County Water District. So what's amazing for us is that we will be able to use the effluent of the wastewater treatment plant as our input water. Toilet to tap never caught on really in America for water recycling. And that's why, you use a lot of water to make energy. But we will use no river water, which, I think for us, we're very proud of. We also have this neat benefit that gasification, because of the water that's trapped in the wood, is actually a water accretive process. We make water as we go along. So in that sense, not only are we able to power critical rural infrastructure and take them off diesel generators when the grid goes down, but we are also able to use their effluent. So our output is their input, their output is our input. So we actually get to go around that whole circularity thing 2 times by co-locating with Calaveras County. And because they are a rural county and, without trying to insult, I will tell you they are a less wealthy county. We're able to help them. They have a keen interest in defending their infrastructure from wildfire, quite frankly, because they don't have the money to put that stuff back. It burns up. And furthermore, someone's still got to keep the water running in a wildfire. And that's up to this water district. And so they are very, very interested in forest stewardship, and put a lot of money and resources into forest stewardship so that wildfire, which is a natural part of the landscape, does not become catastrophic wildfire, which is what we're really experiencing now in California, thanks to a combination of climate change and 100 years of forest stewardship done kind of the wrong way. That project has, we are just now trying to finish our financing. We've gotten bank commitments for about $38 million in capital, and we have just started a crowdfunding campaign to provide the equity component that will help us address some additional requirements that the U.S. Department of Agriculture has put on the project.
That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Yeah, we're excelling. It's the first time we're doing this, and we've always been into this model of community scale, community projects. Biomass is better when it's smaller, and we thought we wanted to try and adapt our financing to that same sort of community ethos. So we've been working with this firm called Funding Hope, and we're gonna make an effort at this project to try and keep the financing of it community based as well.
So on that note, I was wondering if we could also do the same kind of for the biochar slice of the business. Like, how much does that generate in removals? Where is that at right now? Are you looking to grow it? And how much can it grow actually at this point?
Well, absolutely. We're looking to grow it. I mean, we've been selling biochar basically since we built our first plant in Poland in 2003. So we have a lot of experience here in California is where it really started becoming carbon removal, because basically when we built our first plant in California in 2009, we were kind of the only place you could get it if you wanted a whole truckload of biochar. And so what happened is farmers just started showing up and saying, hey, do you have this stuff? And we did. And really, why farmers wanted it at the time had nothing to do with carbon and everything to do with water, right? Water availability is an issue in California agriculture. And when your crops are sort of high value specialty crops, tree crops, citrus, avocados, crops where, theft is a problem because the fruit is so valuable, you find people are willing to pay to improve the ability of that soil to hold on to water. And that's exactly what biochar does. We also sell it to a lot of municipalities and government agencies in the context of stormwater management, because like how it functions by holding on to water and giving the trees more time to suck it up, which means they have to irrigate less. Biochar will function like the Brita filter in your refrigerator. It will hold on to the heavy metals and such that are washing off of your cars and into your waterway. So groups like the Highway Administration, cities, municipalities tend to be very interested for it in terms of, hey, how can we do a better job of keeping the cadmium, chromium, copper, nickel, molybdenum out of the San Francisco Bay?
I have a question that kind of makes most folks in this space jump a little bit every time I ask, but given that you're already doing both biochar and BECCS, I have to ask your expert opinion on the difference in the two approaches as far as their potential to scale goes.
Yeah, look, I'm pretty firm on this. BECCS is the only way. But you have to understand, my background is sort of economic development and finance. So I look at this much through the lens of what can I get financed? What can I make real now? And frankly, we tried the Silicon Valley route, and for every wealthy software guy who's now a climate change guy, climate change is not a software problem, it's a hardware problem. So I think the challenge becomes you've got to get hardware out there. And the only way you can get hardware out there is project finance. And so we need a model that is financeable irrespective of your views on the environment. And for us, that is really only BECCS. We're quite plain with people that the only reason we did not go bankrupt as a company in 2010 is because biochar is valuable. So we need all of these things, but no one in 2009 would have given us money to build a biochar plant. They gave us money to build a power plant that happened to also make biochar.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that answer, really, because like I said, most people jump at this question and usually the answer you get is like, oh, we need all the tools in the toolbox and that's it. But there is that realistic point that you're making exactly, is that not all of it is bankable and not everything can be deployed right now. And given that you are already doing both of these two things, you're not biased. You don't have a bias against one or the other. So it was really great to hear that type of answer. For once.
There are two reasons. And one of them is, look, we didn't invent this stuff. We're not trying to design a better mousetrap. We're trying to solve an environmental problem. And so, for us, there is no, we did not invent the gasifier. We purchased them from people who are really, really good at making gasifiers. And so in that sense, look, if we all had decided that climate change is an urgent problem, and if we all had decided, at least here in California, that wildfire or catastrophic wildfire is an urgent problem, we literally don't have time to do these dinky little pilot scale things that, might become grand in a while. So we're just focused on what we can actually deploy in a productive fashion now. It does not mean that we're not big believers, huge believers in all of the above. And we're super happy that people are working on other, new, cool, and innovative things. We just have to do what we can deploy.
Yeah, exactly. And that's there's kind of like this hyper optimism in the industry is of where, oh no, but we definitely all the solutions are needed and all the solutions must be worked on, which is true, but nobody ever goes beyond that to say, but such and such solutions currently can be scaled faster, which is what we need, really.
And that was always puzzled me. And again, I see this very through, people default to what they know, right? And I kind of know finance. So what has always puzzled me about this is that the capital seems to be going only to the sort of super flamboyant, highest technology kind of Buck Rogers world stuff and not to scalable solutions. And that is, they say scalable, but they mean scalable like in time or scalable after we get it all figured out, as opposed to scalable right now. And that is why, again, we're sort of really excited to see, maybe crowdfunding is the example, because maybe people who live in a community that's wildfire threatened, or people live in a community that is not climate resilient, but needs to figure that out in a real hurry, will be the ones who are more eager to put their capital to work, because they're not trying to take over the universe. They're not trying to get a 50x return or to understand how they can become the next Microsoft. They're trying to make their community climate resilient. They're trying to make sure they don't die in a fire.
Greg, I also wanted to ask, since you mentioned carbon credits, I guess that kind of makes you a player in the carbon markets. I know that you guys are partnered up with Carbon Future. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So initially, we were working with, I guess I'm not allowed to say, but we were working directly with one of the names we all know in the big tech space, who was very interested and early adopter of carbon credits. And in the end, it was sort of like, well, you're too small, because we do these community scale plants. And because it's an essential component of the financing scheme, we kind of need to get these carbon deals done now, post COVID, before we complete financing. And so after a lot of, time, energy, effort, and diligence, it was said, we really like what you're doing, but we're not comfortable with the scale. So we'd like to introduce you to this firm, Carbon Future. And Carbon Future is that kind of awesome connector that allows us with we've got a 2 megawatt plant in the town of Northport. We've got a 3 megawatt plant in the town of Willoughbyville. These are towns you've never heard of, right? And 98% of California has never heard. But by working with a group like Carbon Future, they're able to be I guess the best thing I could think of is they're the network of capillaries that connects us to the artery of capital coming out of the big, reinsurance and tech space for the voluntary carbon market.
Okay, gotcha. Perhaps that gives you kind of a better view of also the state of the VCM, maybe now, or like the way you see it and its role in scaling CDR.
Yes, but I'm going to give you a crummy answer, because I'm going to tell you I'm excited and petrified. I'm because the whole damn thing seems to rest on like 4 big companies. And if they suddenly decide that, yeah, okay, we got enough of these carbon credit, like, ouch, that's going to stop in a hurry. And so I am at that stand really worried that the voluntary carbon market seems to still be, what do they talk about in business school? You've got a significant customer concentration problem. Most of your sales are going to the same people. On the excitement side, I will tell you that the market is growing fast. Look, I've been hearing politicians talk about carbon credits since 1999. That's how long I've been in the space. And I thought it was all horse crap. And all of a sudden, we are now really turning those into money. But the first time I turned a carbon credit into money, it was for $2.40. Well, the prices now for BECCS credits are at $1.80. So that's what is that? 36 months, maybe. Well, time goes by faster than I think it does. Maybe it's more than that. But the point of it is the hockey stick that those prices have gone up has been dramatic, and it literally almost, you could say, blessed by God, because we've gone up that hockey stick at the same time the COVID took us up the hockey stick of, oh my God, you want what for concrete now? You want what for steel now? You want what for, you know how much a transformer costs now relative to what it used to cost? Like, it's jaw dropping. You can't believe this. This isn't the fancy stuff that's gotten expensive. This is the basic stuff that's gotten expensive. So what's unique is that the world doesn't know, because our business model hasn't changed, because it's just sort of been miraculous that those two things allowed everything from the outside net, when you look at the IRR, the investment return on investment that you get from one of these plants, has kind of stayed the same. But it's really been luck in that carbon credits have gotten rich. At the same time, you need more money to get the same return, because you're spending so much more to deploy the asset. And that has been really unique. So we're excited about carbon credits. We're almost more excited about the market for biochar is being driven forward, because at the end of the day, the carbon credit is just a piece of paper that said you did an environmentally good thing. We still want people to do the environmentally good thing, right? Like, that's the thing that matters. And the spotlight seems to be more on the piece of paper than the actual thing. And I think we cannot forget that. And I'll tell you now, we compete in the biochar market with a lot of people doing silly things. I mean, basically making biochar and putting it in a landfill or a cave and saying, there you go, climate change solved. Like, no, that's just not the right, it's just a suboptimal solution. And I get it that we need all things, but the idea is for us not to waste resources, right? Any more than we want single-use plastics, right? We're wasting a resource. Like, don't waste the resource. The biochar in and of itself is a good thing. Making that solution, keeping our focus there, and using the carbon credit as a way to help monetize, that's what we want to do. But we cannot look at these two things as separate goods, which kind of gets you back to why we like BECCS plants as the solution, as opposed to, say, biochar only.
But kind of going back to the idea that the market is currently held up basically by these like 4 or 5 major companies, do you see the idea of like a convergence between voluntary and compliance markets not just solving that, but do you see it as a plausible thing in the future?
Absolutely, I do. And I think the new studies that have come out in terms of biochar permanence, things like that, clearly the market is telling us that biochar is viewed as a high quality carbon removal. Now, I still chafe that I can watch a biochar, a carbon credit for direct air capture get sold for $900 of credit, and we can only get $170, and I'm frustrated because no, a credit should be a credit should be a credit. If you look past that for the moment, we still have a real opportunity there.
And how about the way carbon removal is developing in the US specifically, like in the context of today's political environment? How do you see moving further?
No, this is a thing where, again, I have a kind of weird approach here. Our solution is like the Americans Love Puppies Act. We get just as much support from Republicans as we do from Democrats, from the governors as we do from the legislature. And maybe they support these things for different reasons, but we really see no impact. And again, look, I know it's different for the solar guys, right? I know it's different for the wind gals, but in our world, hey, we're taking care of the forest. We're taking care of rural communities. We make this crazy good stuff called biochar that helps farmers need less water. Remember, we've been doing this since 2003, right? We've been selling biochar in California since 2009. Nobody was giving us carbon credit, right? And so in that sense, these are things which are goods in their own right. Now maybe you are focused on the importance of biochar for carbon removal, and our citrus farmer in Fresno County is focused on biochar so he can grow his oranges. But you always say growing citrus. I don't know why. So he can grow his oranges with less inputs. Like, hey, we both get what we want. We both get what we want, and we can absolutely be on opposite sides of the aisle. So really, for us, we just had Trump put out an executive order on, promoting the forest, and it's got bioenergy in the first paragraph. Now, I know executive orders tend to be just words on paper, and we've seen a lot of executive orders over the years, but I think there's absolutely just as much reason to be hopeful in our kind of corner of the world. And because I think ours is the only solution which is demonstrably scalable now, like, hey, aren't we crazy excited that, there's a desire to look at those situations? And remember, it's not just the forest, right? Our first two projects were in ag land. Our second plant ran on peach pits. Our first plant ran on prunings from the almond and the walnut orchard. You know what they do with those pruning? Yeah, they push them into a pile at the end of the row and they set them on fire every year. That's not good. Like, we've got a solution for that too. And it's the same thing. We take that waste and we turn it into carbon removal. We turn it into water efficiency. We turn it into, better stormwater management and keeping heavy metals out of your American waterway. I mean, I don't know. Yes, we are still very excited about our space, so I'm sorry for droning on, but I really think there is every reason to be hopeful that we're going to do just as much, we're going to do more in the next 4 years than we did in the last 4 years.
That is absolutely a hopeful message, and it's certainly in everybody's interest that things stay the way that they are right now and only get better from here. I'm really glad to hear that carbon removal isn't your chosen pathways of carbon removal aren't suffering at all. Greg, I do have one last question for you before we wrap up this episode. What does Phoenix Energy have lined up for the near future that you can kind of give us a sneak peek at already?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So 2 very exciting developments. One is the impending startup of a 2-megawatt plant that's called North Fork Community Power. It's incredibly exciting. And, for us, look, it's 14 jobs in the part of the world that hasn't seen a job since the sawmills shut down, right? So we're very excited to see that one get to the end of the road. And we kind of tell the joke that, one plant is lucky, 2 plants is a trend. It takes 5 to make a business. We have just gotten all of our committed capital for the debt portion of our next 3-megawatt plant, the Blue Mountain Electric Company. And we are so excited to prove out this model of community finance by crowdsourcing the equity to go alongside of all of that debt and grant support that we've been lucky enough to receive. And so that project we hope to begin construction on later this, let's say earlier this summer. And then finally, the last exciting thing is in California's Job Purse program, sort of as recognition for the jobs we create in significantly depressed California communities, we've just received a small grant from California Jobs First for another project that we are doing with the Calaveras County Water District. Again, proving out this model that the alignment of BECCS with, used to power and decarbonize critical rural infrastructure is just a match made in heaven. So super crazy, ultra exciting 2025 for us anyway.
Absolutely. It does sound like it. And I'm definitely looking forward to all these upcoming news and probably getting a chance to cover them once they're official.
Amen. And next time you talk to one of your venture capital buddies, you need to tell them they got to do something more than software with their money.
Will do. Greg, thank you so much for being here. It was great to speak to you today, and wish you genuinely a very, very successful rest of 2025.
Hey, a lot of fun. Really appreciate the opportunity and appreciate what you do to keep the spotlight on this. Thanks so much.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Carbonsations podcast and would like to hear more conversations like this, please be sure to subscribe. We really appreciate the support.